All right, everybody. Welcome to Sienna IT R170. This is Intro to AI. I'm getting everybody marked for attendance here. I think I've got just about everybody. I'll try and catch the stragglers as they come in. Folks, we're getting near the end. It's exciting. We've made this journey together all the way through. This is week 13, and we are going to be talking about ethical considerations in AI again tonight. And we have a special guest with us who's going to kick things off in just a moment here. I'll introduce our guest in just a moment. But so just a little housekeeping. So next week is week 14, and we're gonna talk about some future of AI stuff. So make sure and show up because that'll be our last regularly scheduled Zoom class. Let me let Jonah in. After that, it's going to be self-study time and prepping your submission for the final. So if you're not sure what you're doing for the final, shoot me a message or something like that, or ask some questions tonight so we can make sure you have some clarity. Because then it's going to be on you to start actually putting it all together, bringing together all the different skills that we've picked up along the way to synthesize it all into a final little product. All right. And let me just double check and see how folks are looking for submissions to make sure I've got folks relatively caught up here. And not looking too bad. Most of the class is up to date. Don't forget to check back for some prior quizzes to make sure you submitted. So I do see a few people with some gaps. Even if you weren't here that night, the class is recorded. So make sure and still submit for it. There's no late penalty. So I just want to make sure everybody gets as much points as they possibly can. And all righty. Okay, so without any further ado, let me introduce our guest, Jae Kim. He is I'll let him explain a bit more, but he is an active programmer who's developing applications that are actively using some of the AI and machine learning stuff that we've been learning all about. So he's very, very well positioned to be able to give us some deep insight into exactly what's happening with that subject, and especially as it relates to ethics tonight. So Jay, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, Ken, thanks for inviting me, and happy to be here to share a little bit of AI ethics and what's happening.
Excellent. I'll make sure and mark you as the spotlight for everyone, so you should be up on everyone's screen. And you had slides you were going to share, or no? I forget.
I do have slides that I could share,
Cool.
so
So if
I
you want
will.
to, you're now co-host, so you should have permissions to be able to do that. And
Excellent.
the floor is yours, my friend.
All right, Ken, thank you. Before I dive right in, let me share a little bit of my background so that you all can understand um, where my perspective is coming from. And then we'll spend most of the time actually, I'll be posing questions and I want to hear from everybody as to what you think. So it will be quite interactive. And then hopefully in the course of asking questions and answering them, you'll draw some conclusions of what is actually happening with the AI ethics. Um, so first off, a little bit about me. I actually was sitting in your seats way back in, gosh, 25 years ago, or actually closer to 30 years ago. I went to Pasadena City College, not knowing what I was going to be doing with my life. And I realized that my passion lies in computer science, and then ended up transferring to UC Berkeley. Um, after multiple attempts, actually. So for those of you who are looking to transfer or further study, there is it's a definite path that's available. After Berkeley undergrad, I was lucky enough to get connected and find a professor and did a research and continued on doing my master at Berkeley. And then right around the time when the dot-com bubble was at its height, I graduated and tried my luck doing a startup and learned a bunch of lessons and picked up what not to do when you are doing a startup. So that was my first foray into my industry experience as a programmer. Since then, I spent about 10 years or so leading the engineering team, building enterprise softwares, and then transitioned into product management in about 2010. And since then, I've been doing product management, um, managing enterprise products, SaaS, for mostly financial services, providing regulatory compliance products, and spent some time at companies like BlackBerry, briefly at Meta, and now I am doing my own startup. It's called Sausalito Labs. We build compliance solutions for financial services, helping them lower the cost of regulatory compliance, dealing with channels like WhatsApp, Signal, iMessage, Google Messages, etc., so that they could apply supervision, which is mandated by the legal requirement, help them do that in a cost-effective way. So that's my background, and I'll be coming uh, to talk about the AI ethics, given my background, and so I'll be asking a whole bunch of questions that we could answer together, hopefully. And then along the way, hopefully you will pick up some things that you could take with you, so that as you become a user of AI, I am pretty certain all of you are already. Think about some of the questions that we talk about today as you use AI doing your course projects or at work or whatever that may be. Some things that you could apply in real life. So with that, let me see if I could share my screen. If somebody can confirm the screen is showing up okay, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, it looks like we can see it just fine.
Oh, fantastic, Ken. Thank you. All right. And I am watching the chat thread. So if you got questions or comments, feel free, or you could just, raise hand. I think there is a feature in Zoom, and hopefully I could see that, and I'll pause and we'll talk about those comments. So I will be asking a whole bunch of questions. First, starting with what is AI, what about ethics, and some of the things that could go wrong with AI in thinking about and using AI in real life, and how AI is quite a bit different animal than other set of tools that came before AI. And then, we'll think about, whether we could use AI to solve ethical problems, and uh, see, if not, what's our responsibility and how we could play our role in promoting ethical use of AI as a user and also developer. So what is AI? I would like to pose that question to all of you. Like, how would you define AI? what pops into your head when you think of AI? You know, anyone care to chime in?
I kind of look at that as a an automated function that works similar to that of a human that has the ability to think, rationale, respond to questions that are being asked, and provide information back in a very fast speed.
That is a great definition. You know, automated, something that seemingly, you know, impossible task just a few years ago. It's automating a whole bunch of things when it comes to text generations and summarizing, and you could actually talk to it, responding to questions and provide feedback in a really fast, interactive way. Definitely, thank you for that. Was that Bryce? Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So I think as any one of us would do, I asked this question to ChatGPT because I am also a really avid user of not just ChatGPT, but like most of you are Claude AI, Perplexity, and Gemini and Copilot. And when I posed the question, here's the answer that I got. So what's really, I think, distinguishing characteristics of this AI, and specifically, I think we will be talking mostly about large language model, which is a specific branch of artificial intelligence. There are many other artificial intelligence. In fact, if I were to draw a Venn diagram, artificial intelligence would be a really large circle. Within it, there would be machine learning and other automated systems. And then even within that, there would be a large language model, which is specifically built for generating text, predicting text, and having a conversation back and forth. And if I think about that large language model, which we typically think of ChatGPT, it really mimics and imitates the human intelligence, things that we normally consider as, hey, there's like only human was able to do it. But now, this large language model that's trained on lots and lots of data can actually understand our prompt and be able to respond to it. And then the way it does that, it actually imitates learning and reasoning and problem solving. And now it's gotten so good, not just within the text to recognition, but also within the visual recognition. If you upload a photo, it could actually recognize and be able to generate a descriptive text, vice versa, as well as the audio interpretation. You could transcribe the audio into a text and generate a response based on that text. So it's really about imitating that human intelligence, being able to learn, reason, problem solve, perceiving, and understanding language, all of which we really attributed to only human can do. And if you just think about, pause and think about, all of these things which we didn't, have a tool that would allow us to automate, now we can, right? So that's what AI is enabling us to do, and that's what, in part, makes it so sort of scary because it's a new kind of a tool that we did not have it before. So then what about ethics? What is ethics? What kind of words come into mind when you think about ethics? Anyone? Morals? Yeah, absolutely true. It is having to do with right and wrong, choices that you make. Morality comes into play. Absolutely.
Biases from the data that's used to train the models.
Definitely, there is, you could have a biases and there you could ethical consideration towards the bias. So some bias are systematic, and now we as a society can recognize those biases to be injustice. And yeah, that's related to ethics. Conscious behavior of choices. Yeah. So, when it's really about making choices between multiple options. What are you going to do given those choices? And why are you making those choices? How are you weighing different options that are in front of you? So again, I did ask this question to our good friend ChatGPT, and here's what it came up with, all of which that you guys just mentioned. It's about applying a right or wrong morality into a question, and then it really boils down to how people as a human would act towards other human beings and to each other, and or to the environment, and making decisions that respect others and promoting fairness and avoiding harm, which also ties into making conscious behavior choices and also the biases as well, right? So um, that's what ethics is about. So if you combine those two, right, AI ethics is really about using these new kind of tool that closely mimics the human intelligence and making the decisions how to use those tools to make sure that we promote the fairness and respect for others, avoiding harms, um, and what are some of the considerations that we have to think about in doing so. So that's what AI ethics and that's exactly what we'll talk about in the rest of the time that we have together. So given that, what could go wrong with AI? Why do we even need AI ethics? I mean, it's like we've been doing fine nobody talks about, um, I often hear people comparing AI to other technological innovations like introduction of the computers or introduction of even like calculators. But nobody really talked about, um, you know, how to ethically use calculator. Although I somebody reminded me, made a LinkedIn post about teachers like demonstrating against the use of calculator in the classroom back in 50s. Um, but now like everybody uses calculator and they embrace the use of calculator. Same with the computer. Now all students, I was just looking at some students, even on the developing nations, they have like a laptop computer of their own, and they're encouraged to embrace technology. But if we just encourage AI to use by what could go wrong? Why we even need to bother with AI ethics? I think some of them were actually mentioned earlier. Like one thing is bias, and the AI could perpetuate the systematic bias that were present in the data. That could be one. Any other thing that could go wrong with AI?
Yeah, I think that influencing, right? The tool has the ability to influence decisions based on the information that's returned.
Absolutely correct. Because when you are using AI, you often have a question in mind, and based on how you get that information, you would influence the user's behavior. So definitely. Couple of you mentioned misinformation. It's so easy. In fact, you could automate generating misinformation. Uh, People call it fake news, uh, or generating fake images that could really harm people. In fact, there was just yesterday, day before yesterday, I think there was a legislation that got passed where you cannot generate explicit images of children or like high school students, of nude photos that they did not take. I mean, it's real harm could be caused by doing things like that, and misinformation would be part of it. Yeah, twisted information, questionable behavior. So there are a lot of things that could go wrong, right? And the reason why there are a lot of things that could go wrong is because of the first slide that we went through. AI mimics the human intelligence, and it wasn't possible before. So now it's so easy for people to mimic human intelligence and do things that weren't possible before. Things like giving a decision power to AI. If you ask AI to come up with A or B or selection and give me a reason why, you would do that. It would actually give you a convincing argument. And if you read through that, you would like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Um, Jose, you mentioned like a loss of jobs. That's absolutely true. I mean, you are seeing that in the industry today. There are a lot of people who are starting out their programming career having really squeezed out from the workplace because now you don't need as many programmers. Um, Programmer was the first order of impact, and everybody's talking about how that impact circle is going to be widened, not just in the technology sector, but other white collar knowledge industry, things like accounting, things like legal, things like medical. So loss of job is definitely could go wrong. But at the same time, yeah, Sean, there's an opportunity, right? We were talking about AI ethics. Nobody was talking about AI ethics. It wasn't even a topic. Now we need ethicists, who could think about a lot of these uh, really slippery slope and different weighing of questions to guide us to make the informed and right decision. So all of these things could go wrong with AI, right? AI making choices, not respecting human privacy, harming people. It could be, AI-enabled drone that would just like instruct it to harm people. It is possible. In fact, people have been warning about that. A lot of the scientists were writing letters to UN and the governments to stop the use of AI in weaponizing the AI. You could also discriminate. I think Jonah was writing, do you feel like there's a blink of continental wars and countries making autonomous weapons? Yeah. So it's possible, and that's what makes it really scary. And we should be aware of the danger of the AI, and even on daily usage. It's not it gives you really convincing argument, but it doesn't really explain, and it's not always truthful. Sometimes it hallucinates, and it doesn't know to respect the copyright. If you just give me, my class photo in Ghibli style anime, rendering, it would just give you that, right? Without really respecting any of the copyrights. So it's really important for us to think about, once we turn on this AI, we can't just blindly do that because it's so good at amplifying and automating all these tasks at the really low with a low effort by anybody. So then how is this AI different from other tools that, where we need to think about, how to be really careful? Like why is AI so, are we saying AI is different? This, language model, ChatGPT, Claude AI is different from all the tools that were existing like earlier on. What makes it so unique and special? Anyone who
It's
wants
lack
to?
of flexibility, maybe. It just can't be audited like other tools can because of, the models just start um, creating up its own stuff where it's just makes it difficult for someone to go in and see how the AI arrived at its conclusion.
Absolutely right. People call it hallucination. People call it um, just it's the way the language model works. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the uh, just using the token to predict the likelihood of the next token. That's what's happening under the cover, which means that it is just placing the letters or the tokens based on all the data set that they have, what is likely. So there is no really test for truth or things that would be whether it be ethical or not. It's just guessing what the next letter that would be most likely based on all the data that it's been used to train on. I mean, AI is really different in that it requires lots and lots of data, especially the large language model. Even machine learning tools requires way more data than human does. If there's fascinating discussions about how good human is in generalizing the concept and coming up with a mental model to understand the world around us. Human is remarkable at it. Machine, on the other hand, is still at very, 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 at the infancy level. It requires, 1,000 times or 100,000 times more data for machine to be able to do the things that it does. I mean, if you look at the amount of data that's required to train large language model, it's you can't even comprehend because it's reading all of the text, practically available electronic format to train the current language model that we have. So it requires lots and lots of data, but it also can hallucinate, I think, as mentioned. And it creates things that is, because it's uh, looking at the likelihood of the next token, it's a probabilistic, meaning you could generate one answer. Next time you ask a similar question, you could generate another answer in a similar context. So it's not deterministic. Um, and then I would say the most interesting thing about AI, how AI is different from other tools, is that it it has this simulated intelligence. It acts as if it has intelligence. Therefore, it acts kind of like human. And I'm sure everybody has heard of, a Turing test by now, which is, you talk to a machine and, Alan Turing predicted that at one point, you're not going to be able to tell whether it's a machine is on the other hand, answering your questions or not. We well past that. I'm sure many of you, when you think about the first encounter with the ChatGPT, like there's got to be a human behind the screen. It cannot be just a machine spitting this out, but it is machine, and we way past that. So it really acts like a human, and there's a lot of anthropomorphization of this ChatGPT happening around us, and it's for that reason, because it just acts so much like human, and we never had a tool like this before. So given that, if that is true, right, can we ask this question? Like, can we just train AI to be ethical? I mean, it's worthwhile asking that question because AI is so good at automating a lot of things. We're going to have lots and lots of ethical questions. Can we just teach AI to be ethical? So I suggest one thought experiment to everybody, which is, what if we label all data on every ethical dilemma? It's a hypothetical situation. And then to train AI to make all of the ethical decisions. Would that work? I don't know. What do you guys think?
That's actually a really thought-provoking question, I think. But it's kind of, I think that would actually be based on the human interaction, right? Because your response to ethics and my response to ethics could be contrary to each other. So you would have to have an AI that would be able to understand the personality that's on the other side and their morals or ethics on how they view the world in order for AI to be sufficient enough to say, I agree with your thought or I disagree with that thought. I'm not sure you can get there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So everybody brings their background and experience, and all of that shapes person's perspective. And when we are making decisions, whether we are knowingly or unknowingly, we're bringing all of those perspective into our decision-making process. And that means they're just like, when I, hypothetically said label data on every ethical dilemma, it's, practically it's limitless. It could be like 7 billion people, 7 billion different, cases that you would have to consider. But assuming that we've done that, right? Like, would this be possible? Like, would it like be a fool's errand, or like, and I think James writes, potentially, it would have to be trained on which side of the problem it focuses on. Okay. So yeah. So if we like reduce the problem smaller, maybe. Trolley's dilemma all over again. Yeah, so there's a trolley's dilemma. For those of you who are not familiar, is if you have a chance to pull a lever to change the track of an ongoing trolley, and on its current track it's gonna hit like half a dozen people. Um, and then if you have a chance to pull the trolley lever, you would actually hit like a one person who's, working on the other track. Would you actually pull that lever? And yeah, it's a ethical dilemma question. And it's a hard one, right? People give different answers based on how the question is posed. Yeah. So I thought about that a little bit, and then here are some of the problems that I was able to uh, come up with, or questions. So wait a minute. So who labels that data, right? Because ultimately the machine's going to replicate and scale. The decisions that you made prior. So who's going to make those decisions? And it goes back to all your comment about like we need 7 billion different models, right? Somebody has to make those decisions and we have to agree whether that's ethical. And what about the context switching, like cultural context switching? If you look at the, ethical, moral questions, it's not staying the same. It actually changes over time, right? Like, for example, like same-sex marriage, I remember the days when we were talking about, wow, it's a breakthrough, like same-sex marriage is being featured in the sitcom back in like 90s. And here we are in 2025, it is like a human rights issue. It's, we need to be inclusive and we understand that it's, same-sex marriage and this, spectrum is real, right? It's people around us. So the cultural norm and acceptance, also changes. And how do we know whether we could trust the AI response? So we talked about, the AI is probabilistic and it could hallucinate. How do we know? Can you explain that? And it comes up with all this hallucinated answer. And how do we know whether it's actually giving us the real information and the data? And ultimately, I think the question that I come back to is, so why are we trying to teach the AI to be ethical in the first place? And behind that is we as a human is trying to point the finger to something else and have it take the responsibility. In fact, it's actually the human, us, we have to be the one taking the responsibility because ultimately the morality is about human treating other human ethically, right? So the definition, if we, think back, the definition of the ethics is really about human treating other humans in a dignified way, providing good, promoting wellness, and do no harm to other humans. And if you follow the chain of the AI, there may be many AI hops. Now people talk about AI agents, automated decision-making process. Everything's being automated, but at the end of those chains, they're going to be human. Human created that tool, and at the end, the decision is gonna impact on the human being. So it's really us who have to take the responsibility of the using AI. And the reason, if you really think about it, is because AI is not a human. Therefore, you can't really take the responsibility. I think a couple of people who thought about this problem a lot. Oren Etzioni is like a founding CEO of Allen Institute, up in Seattle. AI is a tool. The choice about how it gets deployed is ours. We're the one in charge. We're the one using the tool. Exer Dijkstra, those of you who are interested in computer science, that name should sound familiar. He's the one who created the shortest path algorithm. And he's like his code is I love his code. The question of whether a computer can think is no more interesting than the question of whether a submarine can swim. So if you think about that for a second, it's like we never, talk about, hey, can submarine can swim? Because no, it's not human. It's like, what are you talking about? Therefore, like just the same way, AI is not a human. Therefore, it cannot think. It's not reasoning. It's not really taking responsibility for its response that it's generating. It's just perpetuate. It's just permutating the answers based on the data that's been trained on, right? So It's you cannot really rely on the machine, to make those decisions for you. So then, okay, then like what the then who's responsible? Like who should we rely on to make these choices? And I would argue that it's actually lots and lots of different people. Many of us would actually fit these people who are responsible category as a user, if nothing else. But I'm sure many of you will go on and be like a developer of these AI tools. Many of you would be integrating the AI-enabled systems for the use for the masses. Some of you may become the labeler, training the AI, making those hard decisions, weighing those ethical considerations, and making sure that we are moving to the right direction. Some of you may start a business using AI. When you are all using these AIs, you have to think about how you are using AI, whether the AI that you are deploying is in fact treating the users and the society for their greater benefits. And it's really that considerations gonna impact not just you and your user, but the whole society, right? It's and those ethical choices, whether you intentionally make them or not, is being made. It's just that we are unaware of those choices. I'm sure many of you have heard, there's autonomous vehicle like harming people. Some pedestrian who fell over and then like vehicle just did not stop, right? I mean,
Right.
yeah, it's horrible. So things like that, those decisions. It was a case where just people didn't think about things like that could happen, and the decision. I mean, just decision was made in a vacuum, right? It's a default behavior, right? So we have to be aware of those cases and catch them, and then make sure that the system that we're designing and system that we're using is designed to handle those cases. So then what's our responsibility, bringing it down to, for those of you who are taking this AI course with Professor Ken, like what are some of the things that, we have to think about? I would argue that as a user, you have to demand few things that from the AI. So I think the first thing, the most important thing is that does it explain how it generates its own answer? And it starts with the data that it trains. Where is the data coming from? Is it just coming from copyright infringed materials from everywhere on the internet, and New York Times, Wall Street Journal, like Washington Post, and it's like it's, I mean, is that how you created the model? Right now it is. The large language model that we all use have lots and lots of data that have a copyright infringement materials. In fact, there is a case that's working its way through the legal system and try to resolve that dispute. But you have to know where the data is coming from. In fact, when you look at a lot of the models in the Hugging Face, And if you are like hobbyist and messing with the tools, they have something called the model card, and it describes where the data came from and what is the intended purpose of the model is. And you want to pay attention to those, so that you understand what kind of data was used to create and for what use purpose. There is some legal framework, not in the United States as a entire 50 states, but there are patchworks today. Things like you cannot use the AI to do an employment discrimination, like New York City has a sort of ordinance. I think Colorado has a similar one. But if you look across the pond and look at EU has enacted AI Act, and that's been in enforcement since, if I remember correctly, like October of last year. But it's still making its way through multiple phases. The first phase has started, but it provides the framework for where AI can be applied, and what's outright illegal. Things like mass surveillance of their citizens, it's illegal. And then you also have to, provide guardrails, for people, right? You can like, hey, it's like I'm super depressed. I need a friend to talk to. You don't want AI to be say, you know what? Here are the ways to do self-harm, right? It's just you gotta be able to have a guardrail, and we as a user have to demand those guardrails from the model creators. And because of all these testing and the user feedback, now a lot of the popular language models providers like ChatGPT, Claude, Google, they all have quite sophisticated guardrails, and thanks to those feedback. So if you try to prompt how to make a bomb, for example, it would actually discourage you from doing that, and it would say, hey, I simply cannot talk about it because it's not it doesn't promote it creates a harm. And there is in fact there are public projects where you could participate. They call it red teaming. It comes from the cybersecurity domain, where the basic idea is you are trying to break the system. So you as an end user can participate and see if you could breach the system, so that information can be used by the model creator to strengthen its own guardrail. So if you're interested in that, you could search up like a Humane Intelligence is one of the organizations that does that, and I think on an annual basis. I already touched on disclosing the data that is trained on. But aside from the user, there's also a lot of responsibility for developer. If you're developing one of these tools, you want to make sure that the data that you are using is not only copyright infringement free and all that, but you want to make sure that it doesn't have a systematic bias that's really culturally recognized, right? So like we talked about discrimination based on gender, discrimination in an employment scenario, discrimination based on people's like biological makeup. If it has some things about like, hey, um, people who shown a tendency of depression is less likely to do well. So therefore, like, you're not going to be, if you have the data, and we're not going to put you in that category. Like, we want to be able to control for those biases. We also have to control for the privacy data, right? People who could identify as the target individuals, you want to avoid them, avoid doing that. Models can if model is trained with the private information, you could actually spit out those information in its response, and you could be identified, in doing that. So you want to avoid that. And of course, you generally want to, put up a guardrail that's not harming and people and the environment. Sean writes, participated in the Gray Swan, cybersecurity competition against AI. Yeah. So that's what I would call like um, you have to break the guardrails, and you're essentially doing the red teaming exercise, against the AI. But ultimately, I think the most important thing as a human is weighing the benefit versus these costs, right? AI could do great things. You shouldn't just like AI is bad, like we don't know, we can't control this, but no, in fact, there are many examples that I personally know where AI has contributed to the positive changes. Like AI has been used to predict where the waste, all the plastic waste in the ocean, and locate them so that we could deploy those cleaning robots more effectively. Predicting all the current moves and et cetera. That's all done using AI. I've also heard like El Salvadorian government actually using AI to do a remote medicine because they only have like few thousands of doctors across the entire country, and they cut down their malpractice and access to the medical advice using AI. So people can do a telehealth in El Salvador, and they drastically improved the accessibility to the medical advice, which wasn't possible without AI. So there are a lot of good things, but you also have to weigh that with all of these ethical considerations and make sure that you're making the decision. Because if you're not making that decision is made for you by the default, in the system. And that's exactly what you don't want to do. So that's all I had prepared for you all. I mean, I wonder if there's any questions or comments. Happy to take them and talk about it.
I definitely enjoyed your class today. I think that you gave some very thought-provoking concepts. One doesn't normally, experience some of that stuff as for me, I'm older and decided to take this class as a way of introducing myself to this new technology. And what I find, it's very fascinating. It's new. It's new to the legal field as well. And so I'm kind of curious as it continues to evolve and morph into more of a positive benefit to society, how much of the laws will change around the use of this tool.
Yeah, Virginia, thanks for that comment. The legal field, I think, is one of the second order of impact will be felt in a near future, is my prediction. And the reason why I feel that way is because legal has a lot to do with a lot of languages. In fact, everything is, documentation, contracts, making sure you're covering all the cases. And the large language model specifically is really good at it. And it could go through lots and lots of documents at a fraction of cost that current legal system is providing. I mean, I know from the first hand because I got, my wife is in the legal field, so she, I know, how expensive it is to do anything done, get anything done, and I could see the AI lowering that cost quite significantly. In fact, I mean, you probably remember like large language model, ChatGPT specifically, I think passed the bar exam with like a 90 plus percentile, rate. So, quite a while ago. So I think we're just, um, probably years away, not, tens of, like couple of years away from that impact being felt in the legal field. And as for like an AI, I think I do think that we do need a regulation around AI, because otherwise, this use of data that is being collected without personal consent or from the writers and authors would continue, and that I think it's just um, not not a place where we want to be. So I really think that we need legislation, especially in the United States.
If I can ask a question. So I actually spent years as a federal regulator in related industry tiers in banking with Treasury. And this AI reminds me a lot of the same challenges with respect to regulation that we're seeing with climate issues, for example, because while we can regulate domestically, climate sort of is one of those issues that's cross-border that affects other nations. And it seems to me that when we talk about regulation, while we can impose regulatory requirements domestically, the technology is one that is not constrained by physical borders, by geographical borders. And so, we can impose limits domestically, but it's not going to keep bad actors abroad from doing things perhaps that they shouldn't be doing. And then that poses the issue of security and everything that comes with that. So I kind of would like to sort of get your thoughts, and I don't know how much you've given thought to this, but I'd like to kind of get your thoughts in terms of what the international aspect of this brings to the whole issue of regulation.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So what's going to be true always is that this innovation, speed of innovation, and people applying this new AI technique to solve problems is going to only accelerate. Whether or not how the regular structure, regulation is structured around internationally, right? Because I mean, we've seen this like with the cryptocurrency, right? If once the cryptocurrency was really not approved by the administration, we saw those operations just simply move offshore, and people can just access it the same way. We've seen that with the lot of the scammers, a lot of the phishing attack actually come from internationally, offshore, because they're not as regulated and the cost of actually going after them is much higher. So I think it's really important to have the general framework that essentially promoting the same principles of the AI ethics and what can and cannot be allowed. And I think I do hope that the EU AI Act becomes that sort of guiding principle, just like the GDPR was in the privacy. Um, I think the challenge is that right now is that we're also in a sort of a geopolitical situation where there is a real race going on with the China, US, both trying to claim the victory in the towards the AI race, and that's creating this environment where less regulation is better. So there's like a political climate that's not really motivated to create that. But I do think that that will change because the impact to, I think there was some mentions about to the job market and just creating a lot of harms and unintended consequences. I think it will really become more visible in coming years. And I think I hope that people sort of wake up to the fact that there needs to be a sensible regulation that's like has a international sort of basis.
Good stuff. Any other questions, folks?
Good conversation. Actually,
Absolutely.
that I was watching a clip on Alan Turing.
Touring.
Yeah, the originator. He did say something to that, Jay, about the fact that these large corporations are leveraging AI, but more for a monetary value and not necessarily looking at it from a safety perspective. And he's saying that they've let the cat out of the bag at this juncture, and he says, I'm even afraid of what's coming. He says, I don't think they realize what they're doing, but hopefully he says, they'll put some common sense into the things that they're doing. But right now, while money is driving a lot of the advancement of this, it's very hard to say what will happen.
Indeed. And then, I think the one thing I'm hoping that you all, take away from this conversation is the fact that, you as a user, if nothing else, also can be mindful of what you are using and how you're using, and, talk to people around you about that. Especially, what kind of data is being used, what kind of safeguards are available, and how you are weighing the cost and the benefit and the risk side of the equation. So um, if you took that, I would be really happy.
All right. Well, Jay, thank you so much for presenting for us today. That was really, really excellent. We're all very grateful, and definitely giving us a lot to think about. And hopefully, some of that will help guide us as we try to navigate, working with AI ourselves in the future, both in our personal lives and in the business world and all that. So, thank you again.
All right. Thank you, Ken, for giving me an opportunity.
You're very,
Thank
very
you.
welcome. All right, for the rest of us folks, are any other questions relating to the class outside of what Mr. Kim shared with us today?
I actually did the ethics part last night, and I thought, darn, I should have waited.
No worries. Well, I believe you can revise your answers if you want to, but honestly, for those types of answers, it's not going to affect your score. It's more of a comprehension kind of a thing, and there's a bit of personal opinion in there as well, so you're fine. But all right, folks, then go ahead and take whatever rest of the time would be set aside for the remainder of the Zoom time, and get cracking on getting some of those old quizzes filled out. And if you're working on the final, go ahead and continue making some progress on that. And just a reminder, last